Hey everyone, welcome back to the Foundry by Forge College. Let's just jump right into it, shall we? Today we are crossing a really massive threshold in our Web3 journey. Now, if you were with us for the last lesson, Secure Development Principles for Contracts, you already know the sheer amount of hard work it takes to build a solid defense. You've minimized privileged operations, you've added your sanity checks, and you're finally thinking transactionally about state changes, which is incredible work. But here is the million-dollar question, and sometimes I mean that quite literally. What happens next? Like, how do we actually know our code is ready for the wild, wild west of mainnet? Well, that's exactly what we're going to master today as we explore the essential next step, an introduction to security audits.
Okay, so here's our game plan for today's explainer. We're going to hit 5 key areas: demystifying audits, defining scope, the auditor's report, the art of triage, and finally, final verification.
Kicking things off with Section 1, demystifying security audits, or, as I usually like to call it, the reality check.
You know, if you're out there diligently applying secure coding patterns, I genuinely applaud you, seriously. But we kind of have to playfully burst the bubble here. You might be sitting there thinking, I wrote secure code, am I bulletproof? And the short answer is, absolutely not. Even with literally perfect defensive habits, you still desperately need an independent set of eyes. Why? Because you just know your code too well. An attacker, on the other hand, only cares about what your code allows them to do. You need an expert who actually thinks like an adversary to challenge all your underlying assumptions.
So let's get our definition straight right out of the gate. What really is a security audit? Well, it's a focused quality and risk assessment. Think of it like a highly rigorous laboratory stress test designed to reduce your attack surface by surfacing defects. But here's the crucial part. What it is not is some magical insurance policy that grants you 0 bugs and absolute invulnerability. Auditors are essentially expert scientists probing your contract under extreme pressure. They reduce the uncertainty, for sure, but they don't eliminate it entirely.
Moving right along to Section 2, defining the audit scope. This is where we draw the boundaries.
Imagine you're hiring a home inspector before buying a house, right? If you only pay them to look at the kitchen plumbing, they're definitely not going to tell you if the garage roof is caving in. Audits work exactly the same way. You've got your in-scope elements, so your specific contracts, specialized libraries, deployment scripts, and then you have your out-of-scope elements. These might be off-chain components or, say, stable governance modules that you just don't want to pay to have reviewed again. Now, keeping an narrow scope absolutely saves your budget and speeds up the audit, but it leaves you with unexamined blind spots, and managing those residual risks, that is entirely on you.
Okay, Section 3, decoding the auditor's report. The lab results are finally in.
So the report lands on your desk, and honestly, for a lot of developers, opening this document feels exactly like getting your final semester grades. It's stressful, but don't panic. Inside, you're going to find a taxonomy of findings. Critical means immediate fund loss or irreversible state corruption, basically the worst-case scenario. High means major vulnerabilities that need timely fixes. Medium usually involves exploitable logic but under very specific constraints. And low or informational generally covers coding style, or maybe some gas optimizations. But remember this, auditors assign these labels based on technical exploitability. You are the one who must contextualize them. A high-severity finding on a public vault holding millions of dollars? That's a 5-alarm fire. That exact same technical finding on an internal, restricted test module? Honestly, that might just be a scheduled ticket for next week. Context is everything.
Now, you're going to get several deliverables back from the auditor. The findings list is specifically for the engineers. It has the raw vulnerabilities, the proof of concepts, and the recommended fixes. The executive summary is for the product owners, highlighting the high-level risk posture. And then the verification report confirms what was actually fixed, and that's for all stakeholders. The way we learn here in the programs at Forge College heavily emphasizes exactly this kind of workflow, taking these abstract auditor artifacts and translating them into concrete, actionable engineering timelines. It's really not just about fixing code, it's about managing the whole project.
Which leads us perfectly into Section 4, the art of triage. Basically, how to handle a finding. All right, this is where the rubber meets the road. You've just received a scary vulnerability report. How do you handle it without completely freaking out? Let's ground this with a real-world scenario. Imagine reading this hypothetical finding. Finding A, reentrancy risk in the withdraw function allowing an attacker to re-enter before the balance is updated. Severity high. Okay, deep breath. The auditor has provided a snippet showing an external call happening before an internal state update. As we know, this is a classic Web3 vulnerability. So here is your exact triage protocol. Step 1. Understand exploitability. Ask yourself,
who can actually call this function? What's the value at risk? If literally anyone can call it and drain funds, well, it's an immediate blocker. Step 2. Choose minimal remediation. Listen, we do not want to rewrite the whole contract here. The simplest fix is often the checks effects interactions pattern. We just reorder the code so we update the user's balance before we make that external call. It's safe, it's minimal, and it's effective. Step 3. Prioritize and document. You establish the deployment gate. You literally write down, this requires 4 hours of dev time, and we absolutely must block mainnet release until the auditor verifies the fix.
And that brings us to the final phase of the audit lifecycle. Section 5, Final Verification, the final sign-off.
You don't just fix the code and silently ship it. No way. You send it back to the laboratory. I really want to emphasize this crucial mindset. Treat the verification report as the gating artifact that allows deployment or public release. The auditor does a verification pass just to confirm your fixes actually work and, importantly, didn't introduce any new bugs. This final piece of paper, that is your ultimate green light for mainnet activation. Without it, the audit simply isn't finished.
So, let's do a quick recap of the core principles we've covered in this lesson. First, scope defines coverage. You need to know exactly what was examined so you can manage the residual risks of what was excluded. Second, severity labels are great guidance, but they require your real-world context to determine the actual urgency. And third, triage is a pragmatic engineering activity. An audit is a repeatable engineering control. It's not some unpredictable, chaotic external event. If you approach it systematically, it becomes one of the absolute most powerful tools in your secure development arsenal.
And just like that, we've reached the end of today's explainer. Next up on our journey, we'll be tackling risk assessment and preparation for vulnerability exploration, where we'll use everything we learned today to start actively hunting for weaknesses ourselves. But before you go, I want you to ask yourself, if an auditor looked at your most recent smart contract right now, what out-of-scope blind spot would terrify you the most? Definitely something to chew on. Keep thinking about that and make sure you head over to forge.college to dive deeper into this subject and access some truly incredible Web3 resources. Until next time, keep coding securely, and I'll see you in the next lesson.